All right, loud and clear. Whenever you're ready, we can dive into whatever you have in mind.
So let's start with human physiology. Uh, we can start like I will breathing and respiration, body fluids and circulation, excretory products and their elimination, locomotion and movement, neural control and coordination, chemical coordination and regulation. So, can you suggest which way we can go to discuss each section in more detail?
We could break it down step by step. A logical way is to go system by system. We could start with breathing and respiration, diving into the mechanics of ventilation and gas exchange. Then we can move on to circulation, linking how blood flows and transports everything. From there, we could naturally transition into excretory systems, how waste is eliminated. After that, locomotion in the musculoskeletal system, and then the nervous system and hormonal regulation. In other words, let's move from the intake of oxygen to its transport, to waste removal, then movement, and finally control. Does that flow work for you?
Yeah, we can start.
Perfect. Let's kick off with breathing and respiration. We'll look at how air moves into the lungs, the diffusion of gases in the alveoli, and how oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange works. Then we'll connect that to how cells get the energy they need. Ready to dive into the details?
Yeah, that's a great plan.
Awesome. We'll take it one clear step at a time, and if anything gets fuzzy, or if you want to zoom in on specific mechanisms, just say the word. Let's do this.
So, when we breathe, okay, and then you mentioned about diffusion of gases in an alveoli, and then how cell gets energy they needed.
Exactly. So when you inhale, your diaphragm contracts, creating negative pressure that draws air into your lungs. In the alveoli, oxygen diffuses into the blood, while carbon dioxide moves out to be exhaled. Once oxygen reaches your cells, it fuels cellular respiration, where glucose is broken down to produce ATP, the energy currency your body uses. So it's all about that seamless supply chain from air to energy.
So, what you are suggesting that when oxygen reaches to the cell, how does the cellular respiration happens there, and uh, because the cell is so complicated and oxygen is reach there through, I think, oxygenated blood.
Yes, exactly. Oxygen arrives via oxygenated blood, thanks to hemoglobin. Inside the cell, oxygen is a key player in cellular respiration. In the mitochondria, oxygen helps break down glucose in a multi step process: glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain, producing ATP, which the cell uses for energy. It's like a carefully choreographed dance of chemistry.
So, okay, only this hemoglobin carry this oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. Apart from that, any other role that hemoglobin play, or what is the relevance of hemoglobin?
Hemoglobin is a real multitasker. Beyond just carrying oxygen, it also helps buffer blood pH by binding some carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions, aiding in CO2 transport back to the lungs. It's essential in regulating oxygen delivery, adapting to altitude or exercise. Plus, in fetal hemoglobin, it binds oxygen even better, helping babies in the womb. So it's a critical player in fine tuning your body's gas exchanges.
Okay, apart from that, how does it fine tune our body and gas exchange? But oh, blood pH, I don't understand that blood pH part.
So, blood pH needs to stay within a narrow range for your body to function. When cells produce carbon dioxide, it dissolves into the blood, forming carbonic acid, which could lower pH. Hemoglobin can bind some of these hydrogen ions, helping neutralize them. That way, hemoglobin acts like a buffer, keeping your blood from becoming too acidic or too basic as it carries carbon dioxide back to the lungs. In short, it helps maintain balance.
Okay, why it help us to neutralize them in order to remove impurity?
Exactly.
Why it need to neutralize them in order to remove the impurity?
Great question. The body needs to maintain a stable pH because enzymes and metabolic processes work best within a narrow pH range. If the blood becomes too acidic or too basic, it can disrupt these processes and harm cells and tissues. By neutralizing excess hydrogen ions, hemoglobin helps keep that balance, ensuring that the body's biochemical functions run smoothly and efficiently.
So, what was that stable pH where that enzymes and metabolic processes works? Can you explain that part?
Absolutely. The blood pH typically hovers around 7.35 to 7.45, which is slightly basic. Enzymes that drive metabolic reactions, like those in glycolysis or the Krebs cycle, function optimally within this pH range. If the pH strays too far outside that range, either more acidic or more basic, enzyme activity can slow down or become dysfunctional, which can impair energy production and other vital processes. So, maintaining that stable pH is crucial for overall cellular health.
So, blood pH and this oxygenated blood, deoxygenated blood has some role.
Absolutely, they're all interconnected. Oxygenated blood, which carries oxygen from the lungs to the tissues, helps support cellular metabolism. And as cells use oxygen and produce carbon dioxide, the blood becomes deoxygenated. Along with that, the presence of carbon dioxide influences the blood's pH, and hemoglobin helps balance that by binding to hydrogen ions and carbon dioxide. This dynamic ensures that the blood pH stays stable and that oxygen delivery and carbon dioxide removal remain efficient. It's all a finely tuned system.
Okay, what was that cellular metabolism?
Cellular metabolism refers to all the chemical reactions that occur within a cell to maintain life. It includes two main processes: catabolism, where larger molecules are broken down to release energy, like glucose being broken down into ATP, and anabolism, where smaller molecules are built up to create cellular structures and store energy. Together, these processes provide the energy and building blocks that cells need to grow, repair, and function properly.
Okay, apart from blood, actually, how does blood produce itself? Blood is a type of, I think, cell. Blood is
Exactly. Blood itself is a tissue composed of various cell types. It includes red blood cells, which carry oxygen, white blood cells, which are part of the immune system, and platelets, which help with clotting. All of these cells are produced in the bone marrow, where hematopoiesis takes place. In the bone marrow, stem cells differentiate into the various blood cell types, ensuring a constant supply and renewal of blood cells throughout life.
so. What about maintaining pH for the blood? That help us to because blood is everywhere, and that maintaining pH help us to regulate the some of the function and function very smoothly.
Exactly. Since blood circulates throughout the entire body, maintaining its pH within that narrow range is crucial for all bodily functions. A stable pH ensures that enzymes and proteins function properly, that oxygen and nutrients are delivered efficiently, and that waste products are effectively removed. In essence, the blood's pH balance helps maintain homeostasis, allowing every cell and tissue to function smoothly and harmoniously.
What was that homeostasis?
Homeostasis is essentially the body's ability to maintain a stable internal environment despite external changes. It involves regulating factors like temperature, pH, electrolyte balance, and nutrient levels in the context of blood. Homeostasis ensures that everything stays balanced so that cells can function optimally. It's like the body's internal regulation system, always working behind the scenes to keep everything in equilibrium.
Regulating factor like temperature, pH, electrolyte balance, nutrient label. Okay, context of blood, ensuring everything balanced. Okay, that cell can function optimally. Body's internal regulation system.
Exactly, you've got it. It's all about that intricate balance that keeps our body functioning smoothly. And it's fascinating how all these systems, like blood pH, oxygen transport, and temperature regulation, work together to maintain that homeostasis. It's truly a remarkable and finely tuned system.
How does that regulations control its own functioning?
That's a great question. The body uses a combination of feedback mechanisms to regulate its functions. For example, when blood pH shifts away from the ideal range, the body can adjust breathing rate to expel more carbon dioxide or use kidneys to excrete excess acids or bases. Similarly, temperature regulation involves mechanisms like sweating or shivering to either release or conserve heat. It's all about these dynamic feedback loops that keep everything balanced and functioning properly.
Okay, and then what next? We can talk about, okay, uh, breathing. Can you give the some of the detailed list where the things are going on, like we take air in and how that air further in the there is a junction where that exchange of gases take place, and further how some of the functioning, how it goes to the heart, and then heart again through arteries and veins, uh, based on they basically supply oxygen to every cell, and then how cell process, like
Absolutely. So, starting from when we inhale, air travels through the nasal passages or the mouth, down the trachea, and into the bronchi, and then into smaller bronchioles, eventually reaching the alveoli. In the alveoli, oxygen diffuses across the thin walls into the surrounding capillaries, while carbon dioxide diffuses out of the blood into the alveoli to be exhaled. From there, the oxygen rich blood travels through the pulmonary veins back to the heart, specifically to the left atrium and then the left ventricle. The heart then pumps this oxygenated blood through the aorta and into the systemic circulation. Arteries branch into smaller arterioles and finally into capillaries, where oxygen and nutrients diffuse into the cells. At the same time, cells produce carbon dioxide and other waste products, which then diffuse back into the blood. The deoxygenated blood returns to the heart through the veins, then to the right atrium and ventricle, and is pumped to the lungs again to repeat the cycle. It's a continuous and beautifully coordinated process.
okay, how that coordination runs smoothly without any external. I think it's all about maintaining balance among what's the actual process is happening.
Absolutely, you've got it. It's like a finely tuned orchestra where every component works in harmony to keep the body running smoothly. All these processes, from breathing and circulation to cellular metabolism, are all interconnected and regulated to maintain that balance and ensure optimal function. It's truly remarkable how the body keeps everything in check naturally.
So you mentioned about when we inhale, air travels through the nasal passage or the mouth, down the trachea and into the bronchi, and then into smaller bronchioles, eventually reaching the alveoli. In the alveoli, oxygen diffuses across the thin wall into the surrounding capillaries, while carbon dioxide diffuses out of the blood into the alveoli to be exhaled. From there, the oxygen rich blood travels through the pulmonary vein back to the heart, especially to the left atrium and the left ventricle. The heart then pumps this oxygenated blood through the aorta and into the uh, systematic circulation. Arteries branch into smaller arterioles and finally into capillaries, where the oxygen and the nutrients diffuses into the cells. At the same time, cells produce carbon dioxide and other waste products, which then diffuse back into the blood. and the deoxygenated blood return to the heart through the veins, then into the right atrium and ventricle, and is pumped to the lung again to repeat the cycle. Okay, but heart is the thing that actually supply this that is the supply chain, because we receive oxygen, uh, okay, and then oxygen is then trans to the heart, and then heart actually play a key role uh, that supply oxygen to every part and remove the waste from the body also.
Exactly. The heart is truly the central pump that keeps everything moving. It ensures that oxygenated blood reaches every tissue and organ, and it also helps in collecting the deoxygenated blood and pumping it back to the lungs for reoxygenation. This continuous circulation is what keeps our cells nourished and waste free, making the heart absolutely vital for life.
Okay, can you tell me what we have discussed till now?
Of course, we've covered quite a bit. We started with how breathing works from inhaling air through the nasal passages and trachea down into the bronchi and bronchioles and finally reaching the alveoli. There, oxygen diffuses into the blood and carbon dioxide diffuses out. Then we talked about how the oxygenated blood travels back to the heart and is pumped through the arteries to deliver oxygen and nutrients to the cells. We also discussed how cells produce carbon dioxide and waste, which then returns via veins to the heart and then to the lungs for reoxygenation. We highlighted the heart's crucial role in maintaining that continuous supply chain of oxygen and removal of waste. And overall, we emphasized how all these processes are perfectly coordinated to keep our bodies in balance.
What is the one thing that fascinates you about this theory?
One of the most fascinating aspects is how incredibly integrated and self regulating the entire system is. The way the body seamlessly maintains homeostasis, adapting in real time to changes and ensuring that every cell gets what it needs is truly amazing. It's like a finely tuned machine that's always working behind the scenes, and that interconnectedness and efficiency never ceases to amaze me.
So, breathing and respiration, a respiratory organ in animals, a respiratory system in human, mechanism of breathing and its regulation in human, exchange of gases, transport of gases, and regulation of respiration, respiratory volumes, disorder related to respiration, asthma, emphysema, occupational respiratory disorders. Uh, what are those things?
Absolutely. So let's break them down a bit. One, respiratory organs in animals. Different animals have adapted various respiratory organs like gills in fish, tracheae in insects, and lungs in mammals, each specialized for efficient gas exchange in their environments. Respiratory system in humans. In humans, it includes the nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli, all working together to facilitate breathing and gas exchange. Mechanism of breathing and its regulation. Breathing involves the diaphragm and intercostal muscles contracting to create negative pressure, drawing air in, and then relaxing to expel air. This process is regulated by the brainstem, which responds to the levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. Exchange of gases. This happens in the alveoli where oxygen diffuses into the blood and carbon dioxide diffuses out, maintaining the balance of gases. Transport of gases. Oxygen is carried by hemoglobin in red blood cells, and carbon dioxide is transported in three forms: dissolved in plasma, bound to hemoglobin, and as bicarbonate ions. Regulation of respiration. This involves chemical control like the levels of CO2 and O2, and also neural control from the brain. Respiratory volumes, these include tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, expiratory reserve volume, and residual volume, all helping to measure lung function. Eight disorders related to respiration. Conditions like asthma involve airway inflammation and constriction. Emphysema affects the alveoli and gas exchange. And occupational respiratory disorders, like those from prolonged exposure to dust or chemicals, can impair lung function. All of these aspects together give a comprehensive picture of how respiration works and how it can be affected by various conditions.
So, respiratory organs in animals, okay, there are different, have different organs. So, gills in fish, trachea in insects, lungs in mammals, that we are, and for efficient gas exchange in their environments. Okay, respiratory system in humans. It include from nose, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchioles, alveoli all work together to facilitate breathing and gas exchange. And then inside the bronchioli, there is a alveoli where oxygen attract and CO2 removed. Okay, other gases, and from there, mechanism and of breathing and its regulation. Breathing involves the diaphragm and intercostal muscles contracting to create negative pressure, drawing air in and relaxing to expel air. This process is regulated by the brain stem, which corresponds to the level of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. Exchange of gases. This happen in the alveoli where oxygen diffuses into the blood and carbon dioxide diffuses out, maintaining the balance of gases. Transport of gases. Oxygen is carried by hemoglobin in red blood cell, and carbon dioxide is transported in three forms: dissolved in plasma, bound to hemoglobin, and as bicarbonate ions. Regulation of respiration. This involves chemical control like level of CO2 and O2, also neural control from the brain. Respiratory volumes. These include tidal volume, respiratory no, reserve volume, respiratory reserve volume, and residual volumes, all helping to measure lung functions. Disorder related to respiration conditions like asthma involves airway inflammation and constrictions. Emphysema affects the alveoli and gas exchange, and occupational respiratory disorders like those from prolonged exposure to dust or chemicals can impair lung functions. So, what is the one or two more things that fascinates you about this thing?
One thing that always fascinates me is how adaptive the respiratory system is. For example, it can adjust to different environments like higher altitudes by producing more red blood cells to capture more oxygen. Another fascinating aspect is the intricate balance between the nervous and chemical controls that keep everything running smoothly without us even having to think about it. It's amazing how the body maintains this delicate equilibrium so seamlessly.
Can you give example how that a delicate equilibrium is and how they maintain it?
Absolutely. A great example is how the body handles carbon dioxide levels. When CO2 levels rise, it leads to a drop in blood pH, making the blood more acidic. In response, the brainstem detects this change and increases the breathing rate to expel more CO2, thereby restoring the pH balance. Conversely, if CO2 levels drop, the body can slow down breathing to retain more CO2 and maintain that balance. This dynamic feedback loop ensures that the internal environment remains stable, allowing our cells to function optimally. It's a perfect example of that delicate equilibrium in action.
Okay, what was that occupational respiratory disorder?
Occupational respiratory disorders are conditions that develop due to prolonged exposure to harmful substances in the workplace. For example, workers in industries like mining, construction, or manufacturing may inhale dust, chemicals, or fumes. This can lead to conditions like asthma, where airways become inflamed and narrowed, or pneumoconiosis, such as coal workers' pneumoconiosis, where lung tissue is damaged by inhaled particles. Another example is occupational asthma, which can be triggered by certain chemicals or irritants. Overall, these disorders highlight the importance of protective measures and proper ventilation in workplaces to prevent lung damage.
Okay, so they all goes through our nose because we can't stop because it is mixed in the air, and because of that, some of the parts that where the exchange of gases take place, there it affects a lot.
Exactly, that's right. Because we breathe in air constantly, any harmful particles or irritants in the environment can make their way into the respiratory system. Over time, this can lead to inflammation and damage, particularly in the delicate tissues of the alveoli and bronchioles. That's why protective measures like masks or proper ventilation are crucial in environments where airborne irritants are present. Is definitely a significant factor in occupational health and overall respiratory illness.
But how can you explain that uh, interaction part and how it damages there and which part they damage?
Absolutely. When harmful particles like dust, chemical fumes, or pollutants are inhaled, they can irritate the lining of the respiratory tract. In particular, the bronchi and bronchioles, which are the airways leading to the alveoli, can become inflamed and narrowed. This inflammation can lead to symptoms like coughing, wheezing, and shortness of breath. Over time, if the exposure continues, it can cause structural damage to the alveoli themselves. For instance, in conditions like emphysema, the walls of the alveoli break down, reducing the surface area available for gas exchange. This makes it harder for oxygen to get into the blood and for carbon dioxide to be removed. Additionally, chronic inflammation can lead to scarring or fibrosis in the lung tissue, further impairing lung function. Overall, it's this combination of inflammation, structural damage, and impaired gas exchange that leads to the respiratory disorders we see.
Okay, fibrosis in the lung tissue. Okay, actually, this chronic inflammation can damage that at the tissue level.
Exactly, that chronic inflammation really can have a profound impact at the tissue level. Over time, it can lead to the thickening and stiffening of the airway walls and the lung tissue itself, reducing their elasticity and making it harder for the lungs to expand and contract properly. This not only makes breathing more difficult, but can also lead to decreased oxygen exchange, and over the long term, it can cause permanent damage. That's why early intervention and protective measures are so important to help preserve lung health.
What was this asthma and emphysema?
Sure, asthma is a chronic inflammatory condition of the airways where the bronchial tubes become inflamed and narrow. This leads to symptoms like wheezing, coughing, shortness of breath, and chest tightness. Asthma can be triggered by various factors like allergens, cold air, exercise, or irritants. Emphysema, on the other hand, is a type of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, that primarily affects the alveoli. In emphysema, the walls of the alveoli are damaged and lose their elasticity, which reduces the surface area for gas exchange. This makes it difficult to breathe out fully, leading to breathlessness. Both conditions are often caused by long term exposure to irritants like cigarette smoke, and they can significantly impact quality of life if not managed properly.
What was this pulmonary disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease?
Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, is a group of progressive lung diseases that make it hard to breathe. The two main conditions under COPD are emphysema and chronic bronchitis. Emphysema involves damage to the alveoli, reducing the surface area for gas exchange, while chronic bronchitis is characterized by long term inflammation of the bronchial tubes, leading to a persistent cough and mucus production. COPD is most commonly caused by long term exposure to irritants, especially cigarette smoke, and it leads to airflow limitation that's not fully reversible. It's a chronic condition that typically worsens over time, but with proper management, symptoms can be controlled and quality of life can be improved.
Okay, can you again key conclusion what we are discussing in this chat till now?
Of course, in this chat, we've covered a lot about the respiratory system. We started with the basics of how breathing works, from inhaling air through the nose and the trachea down to the alveoli, where gas exchange happens. We discussed how oxygen diffuses into the blood and carbon dioxide diffuses out. We also explored how the heart circulates this oxygenated blood and how the respiratory system maintains homeostasis through feedback mechanisms. We then delved into conditions like asthma and emphysema and how chronic inflammation can damage lung tissue over time, leading to conditions like COPD. We also touched on occupational respiratory disorders and how long term exposure to harmful substances can lead to lung damage. In short, we've covered the anatomy and physiology of breathing, the mechanisms of gas exchange, and the impact of various respiratory conditions. It's been a comprehensive look at how our lungs and respiratory system work and how they can be affected.
Okay, thank you.